The story opens in the quiet book-lined study of a wealthy man, a place that should exude comfort and intellect, but instead becomes the stage for a chilling and inexplicable death. The victim, often a respected businessman or aristocrat, is seated at his mahogany desk, engrossed in writing a letter. The room is dimly lit, perhaps by a single lamp, casting long shadows that seem to foreshadow the looming tragedy. As his pen glides across the paper, something goes horribly wrong. Without warning, his body jerks violently, his fingers spasm, his face twists in agony, and he collapses onto the desk, sending ink splattering across the unfinished letter. The scene is eerily silent, except for the thud of his body and the faint scratch of the pen rolling away. There are no screams, no signs of a struggle, just a sudden, brutal end. When others rush into the room, perhaps a servant, a family member, or a colleague, they find him dead, his eyes wide with shock, his hand still clutching the pen. The absence of any obvious cause of death baffles them. There is no blood, no weapon, no sign of an intruder. Only the half-written letter and the elegant fountain pen lying beside it offer any clues, though at this moment, no one suspects that the pen itself is the murder weapon. The atmosphere is thick with dread and confusion. The victim had no known enemies, no reason to take his own life. Yet here he lies, struck down in the middle of a mundane task. The pen, an expensive and seemingly innocuous gift, sits innocently on the desk, its deadly secret still hidden. This scene sets the tone for the entire story, a blend of sophistication and horror, where danger lurks in the most ordinary objects. The mystery hinges on the contrast between appearances and reality, how something as harmless as a writing instrument can conceal a lethal mechanism. By the time Detective Craig Kennedy arrives, the reader already senses that the truth will be far more sinister than anyone suspects. Would you like me to delve deeper into any particular aspect of this scene, such as the forensic details or the psychological impact on witnesses? The opening scene of The Poisoned Pen is a masterclass in tension, blending the mundane with the macabre to create an unsettling tableau of murder. Arthur B. Reeve crafts this moment with deliberate precision, ensuring that every detail, from the setting to the victim's final actions, serves a dual purpose, establishing realism while planting subtle clues for the astute reader. The victim's study is described in rich, almost cozy detail, a sanctuary of leather-bound books, polished wood, and the faint scent of cigar smoke lingering in the air. The desk, an island of order, holds neatly stacked papers, an inkwell, and the fateful fountain pen. This setting lulls the reader, and potential witnesses, into a false sense of security. A man writing letters in his private library is the picture of routine, making the violence of his death all the more jarring. The warm glow of a lamp against the encroaching shadows, the rhythmic ticking of a clock underscoring the silence. These touches heighten the scene's intimacy, making the intrusion of death feel like a violation. The victim, perhaps a shrewd businessman or a philanthropist, exhibits no premonition of danger. His focus is entirely on the letter, its contents mundane, a business proposal, a personal note. Then, without warning, his body betrays him. Reeve's description of the poisoning is clinical yet vivid. Fingers locking around the pen in a death grip, tendons standing out like wires as muscles convulse. Ink splatters across the page, the pen's nib scratching a jagged line, a grotesque parody of writing. The victim might gasp, but no sound escapes. The poison works too quickly. His collapse is almost graceful, forehead striking the desk with a muffled thud. The pen, now sinister in its innocence, rolls to a stop near his limp hand. When the body is found, reactions are layered to build doubt. A servant entering with tea freezes in the doorway. A wife or colleague stifles a scream, their mind racing. Was it a stroke? A heart attack? The absence of blood or struggle deepens the mystery. The half-written letter is scrutinized for coded distress, but its banality frustrates investigators. The fountain pen, an object of admiration, a gift from Mr. X, how generous, is handled carelessly, its lethal mechanism overlooked. This moment is crucial. The murder weapon is in plain sight, dismissed because it's too ordinary, too elegant to suspect. Reeve relishes this irony, a hallmark of the impossible crime subgenre. The second scene of The Poisoned Pen shifts from the visceral horror of the murder to the cool, methodical world of investigation, but Arthur B. Reeve ensures the transition crackles with intrigue. Here, the focus isn't on action, but on the collision of ignorance and insight, as the baffled authorities reluctantly summon Craig Kennedy, the story's scientific detective. A room heavy with defeat. The setting is likely a police inspector's office or the victim's home, now repurposed as an investigative hub. The air is thick with cigar smoke and frustration. Uniformed officers mill about, their usual bravado muted by the case's inexplicable nature. The local coroner, still in his blood-stained apron, shrugs over an inconclusive autopsy report. No signs of violence, no trace of common poisons. The victim's family hovers at the edges, their grief laced with suspicion. Every theory proposed, suicide, a rare disease, collapses under scrutiny. Into this atmosphere of futility strides Craig Kennedy, a figure who embodies the promise of modernity. Unlike the blustering inspectors, he carries no handcuffs or truncheon. His tools are a keen eye and a mind versed in chemistry, physics, and the nascent field of forensics. His entrance is understated. Perhaps he's been observing quietly from the doorway before clearing his throat, but it instantly shifts the room's energy. The police resent his intrusion. The family regards him with desperate hope. The dance of skepticism and revelation. Kennedy's consultation is a verbal chess match. The local inspector, red-faced and defensive, lays out the facts with deliberate omissions, testing the outsider. Kennedy listens without interruption, his gaze occasionally flicking to details others ignored. The victim's slightly swollen fingertips, a faint chemical odor clinging to the desk blotter. When he finally speaks, his questions are razor-focused. Was the victim left-handed or right-handed? Who last handled the fountain pen before his death? Has anyone experienced dizziness or numbness near the study? Each query peels back a layer of the mystery, unsettling the room. A maid recalls washing ink from the victim's hands, an odd detail since he died mid-letter. A butler mentions a visitor who admired the pen days earlier. Kennedy's silence during these revelations is more unnerving than any accusation. The audience senses his mind assembling fragments into a terrifying whole. To the pen as a silent witness. Reeve heightens tension by delaying Kennedy's epiphany. The detective requests to see the study exactly as it was, rejecting the tidied-up version the police prefer. His examination is ritualistic. He sniffs the inkwell, holds the pen to the light, and, crucially, avoids touching its mechanism. The reader, privy to scene one's horrors, watches in dread as others dismiss the pen as irrelevant. A lesser writer might have Kennedy announce his suspicions here, but Reeve prolongs the suspense. Instead, the detective pockets the pen with a non-committal, fascinating construction, leaving the police to misinterpret his interest as academic curiosity. This moment is classic misdirection. Both the characters and the reader are left wondering if Kennedy is onto something or chasing a false lead. The third scene of The Poisoned Pen unfolds with the quiet intensity of a scientist dissecting a deadly specimen. Here, Craig Kennedy retreats to his private laboratory, a sanctum of bubbling beakers, humming electrical apparatus, and the faint tang of chemicals in the air, to scrutinize the innocuous fountain pen that has now become the focal point of the mystery. This is not a scene of flashy deductions or dramatic confrontations. It is a meticulous autopsy of an inanimate object, where the smallest detail may whisper the secret of a man's death. Kennedy's workspace is a stark contrast to the plush, shadow-laden study where the murder occurred. Here, electric light floods every corner, banishing ambiguity. Glass vials gleam on shelves, microscopes stand at attention, and the rhythmic drip of a distillation apparatus provides an almost hypnotic soundtrack. This is a realm where intuition gives way to irrefutable fact. A battleground where Kennedy, armed with science, wages war against deception. The detective's assistant, often the story's narrator, hovers nearby, alternating between fascination and impatience as Kennedy subjects the pen to a series of increasingly precise tests. The contrast between their personalities is deliberate. The narrator's human curiosity mirrors the reader's, while Kennedy's detached focus heightens the sense of methodical revelation. Kennedy's examination is forensic theater. He begins with simple observation, turning the pen in his hands like a jeweler appraising a suspect gem. The exterior offers nothing damning, an elegant casing, perhaps engraved with initials, the weight and balance of a high-quality instrument. But then his fingers pause. A nearly imperceptible seam, a mechanism too intricate for mere ink flow. With tools more suited to a watchmaker than a detective, Kennedy disassembles the pen. The narrator leans in, breath held, as the detective extracts a hidden chamber, no larger than a grain of rice, that once held a lethal dose. A needle, cunningly concealed within the nib's assembly, retracts when pressure is applied in a specific way. The murder weapon was not just a pen, it was a precision-engineered syringe designed to deliver death with the casual act of writing. Kennedy's next steps are clinical. He swabs the interior with slips of chemically treated paper, watching as reactions betray the presence of a rare alkaloid, a poison swift enough to kill mid-sentence, yet subtle enough to evade a routine autopsy. The narrator recoils as Kennedy coolly explains, one scratch, invisible to the eye, and the toxin enters the bloodstream. The victim might feel only a pinprick, if anything at all. Here, Reeve indulges in the era's fascination with scientific progress. The description of reagents changing color, the use of a microscope to detect crystalline residues. These details would have thrilled early 20th century readers for whom forensic science still bordered on wizardry. Yet the true horror lies in the banality of the weapon. The pen, an object synonymous with intellect and civility, has been perverted into an assassin's tool. As Kennedy reassembles the pen, his silence speaks volumes. The murder was no crime of passion. It required resources, technical skill, and a chilling patience. The killer knew the victim's habits intimately, when he would write, how he would hold the pen. This was execution disguised as happenstance. The scene's genius lies in its reversal of expectations. In a traditional mystery, the detective's breakthrough might come from a footprint or an overheard remark. Here, the truth is unearthed, not in the field, but under the microscope. Kennedy's laboratory is as much a setting for revelation as any drawing room strewn with red herrings. The scene closes with Kennedy slotting the pen into his waistcoat pocket. His next move is unstated, but the glint in his eye tells the reader the trap is set. The fourth act of The Poisoned Pen shifts from the clinical confines of the laboratory to to the shadowy world of human connections, where Craig Kennedy must navigate a labyrinth of lies, half-truths, and carefully constructed alibis. This is where the cold precision of forensic science collides with the messy reality of motive and opportunity, a delicate dance of deduction that will lead Kennedy ever closer to the murderer. Kennedy's investigation takes him to the workshop of the pen's craftsman, a small, cluttered atelier filled with the scent of polished metal and ink. The artisan, a meticulous old man with ink-stained fingers, squints through thick spectacles as Kennedy presents the deadly instrument. There is a moment of quiet recognition. The craftsman knows his work, and this pen is not as it should be. With painstaking detail, the pen's origins are revealed. It was a custom order, commissioned under a false name, but paid for in crisp, untraceable banknotes. The modifications, the hidden chamber, the needle mechanism, were added under specific instructions from a particular gentleman who insisted on absolute discretion. The craftsman's unease is palpable. He is a man who takes pride in his creations, and now one has been twisted into something monstrous. Through careful questioning, Kennedy extracts a description of the man who ordered the pen, well-dressed, soft-spoken, with a faint scar along his jawline. The details are sparse, but they align with someone in the victim's inner circle, a business partner, a rival, or perhaps a disgruntled heir. The detective's pulse quickens. The killer is no stranger. They are someone who moved freely in the victim's world, close enough to gift a poisoned pen without suspicion. Kennedy's next stop is a stationer's shop or a luxury goods dealer, where records might reveal the purchaser's identity. The shopkeeper, a nervous man with a ledger spread before him, flips through pages of transactions. Here, Reeve indulges in a classic trope of detective fiction, the slip of paper that changes everything. A receipt, a signature, or perhaps a forgotten detail. The killer, confident in their anonymity, has left behind a single damning clue. But the path is not straightforward. False names, intermediaries, and staged coincidences muddy the waters. Kennedy sifts through the deception, separating truth from misdirection. The reader is kept in suspense. Will this lead bear fruit, or is it another dead end? As Kennedy pieces together the pen's journey from workshop to victim, he also uncovers the killer's motive. Perhaps it was a fortune hanging in the balance, a betrayal buried in the victim's past, or a secret too dangerous to let live. The detective's interviews with secondary characters, a jealous colleague, a spurned lover, a financially desperate relative, add layers of intrigue. Each conversation is a duel of wits, with Kennedy probing for weaknesses while the suspect feigns innocence. The brilliance of this scene lies in its slow, deliberate unraveling. Unlike modern thrillers where action drives the plot, Reeve builds tension through conversation and deduction. The reader, like Kennedy, must weigh each word, each reaction, for hidden meaning. By the scene's end, Kennedy knows the killer's identity, but he lacks irrefutable proof. The pen's origins have pointed him in the right direction, but the final piece of the puzzle requires the murderer to betray themselves. With a quiet smile, the detective begins to formulate his plan. The next move is his. The final act of the poisoned pen unfolds with the quiet tension of a chess match reaching checkmate. Craig Kennedy, now armed with damning evidence and psychological insight, maneuvers his suspect into a position where guilt will reveal itself. This is not a scene of brute force or violent struggle, but rather a cerebral duel, one where the murderer's own arrogance becomes their undoing. Kennedy gathers the key players in the same room where the crime occurred, the victim's study, now stripped of its earlier sense of sanctuary. The heavy curtains are drawn, casting the space in a theatrical half-light. The air smells of leather and lingering tension. The suspect sits comfortably, unaware they are the focal point of an invisible net tightening around them. With deliberate calm, Kennedy begins recounting the case, his voice devoid of accusation. He describes the pen's craftsmanship, its deadly modifications, and the trail that led to its commission. His words are measured, almost conversational, but each sentence lands with calculated precision. The narrator, and the reader, watches the suspect's reactions. A twitch of the fingers, an overlong sip of brandy, a forced smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Here, Reeve employs a masterstroke of misdirection. Kennedy produces the pen, now disarmed of its poison, and casually demonstrates its mechanism. The click of the hidden needle deploying echoes like a gunshot in the silent room. The suspect's composure wavers, their gaze locks onto the pen with involuntary fascination. Kennedy notes this, then casually extends the pen toward them. You recognize it, of course. A unique design, one you specified yourself. The reaction is instantaneous. The suspect recoils, as if the harmless instrument might still strike. This instinctive flinch betrays them more eloquently than any confession. For a breathless moment, the room hangs in equilibrium. Then the dam breaks. Cornered, the killer defaults to bluster, preposterous, or icy defiance. Prove it. Kennedy, prepared, unveils his coup de grace. Perhaps a witness, the craftsman now waiting outside, a shipping receipt for the pen's materials, or an incriminating letter referencing the plot. The evidence is irrefutable, and the suspect knows it. What follows is not a dramatic monologue, but a stark unraveling. The killer's voice drops to a whisper as they confess, not out of remorse, but because pride demands they claim credit for the perfect crime. Their motive, when revealed, is chilling in its banality: greed, revenge, or the toxic allure of outwitting society. Reeve subverts expectations by avoiding a cliché arrest. Instead, Kennedy's victory is psychological. The murderer, stripped of their cleverness, is left hollow. Some versions of the scene imply they will take their own life rather than face disgrace. Others suggest a silent understanding that exposure is punishment enough. The law, in Kennedy's world, is less important than truth. As the suspect exits, under guard or in shattered silence, the study's atmosphere shifts. Sunlight pierces the curtains. The pen, now a mere curio, is pocketed as evidence. The narrator exhales, realizing the horror is over. But the ordinary world feels irrevocably altered. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.